Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, first order, approval of minutes from 5/7/19. May I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor? Any changes? No? We're good? Approved? All right.
Staying.
Okay, you can abstain if you want to. You don't have to, you know. You can still read them and approve them. All right. All right, data around student success at Kennett High School.
So, this is your meeting, but I remember the conversation. I believe both sides were looking at what would be some good data points to take a look at with Jackson and Bartlett students in the conversation around that, around student success, and what would you as board members like for information related to that. And I think Jess had talked about some things related to the number of students who enter 9th grade and the percent that complete in tracking those students. But those are the type of things. So I'll listen as you folks have that conversation.
And
if you have questions.
I think Gail and Joe kind of took the ball and ran with that a little bit and have started a conversation about that, about what are we looking at as far as that and transitions. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to formally meet this Wednesday to kind of lay out. And I've, not high school, but I've got data from 2011 to 2014 that Heather Woodard did for our transition to Bartlett. So we've got some historical data that we can look at that I'll share with Joe on Wednesday. And we were hoping too to get some feedback from all of you folks in terms of where would you like to see us focus, parent perceptions, student success, you know, what kinds of things, information would you like us to get?
I think we talked about it was hard on the student success part with the gradings changing from what it was. I think we said we didn't want to look at grades. I think we were in that meeting where grades weren't as important.
And I'd say from the parent perspective, just to looking at what we're doing, it would be nice to hear how parents felt was successful as far as learning extracurricular, how to be successful after, getting their kids ready for after high school. You know, how easy was the transition? Where was the information in the community? You know, are we recreating the wheel every time for grants and college stuff or internships and stuff like that?
And in terms of getting it from, in terms of where to get it from, I mean, I think we've tossed around some ideas. You know, obviously you guys are collecting some data, but if there's a way to talk with the students as they're going through it, and you know, not that we want to hear every up and down that every student's having, but when they get to a point where we have to figure out when do we think they would have a good perspective, right? Is it 2 years after high school? Is it at the end of every year in high school? You know, is it once, you know, when they enter and then when they exit? So I think that might be helpful for us to look at, and the same thing with the parents.
We as the career tech, our committee is also looking at how do we get some information for after high school and where the students went and how to collect that data. So I know even Kennett's looking at trying to come up with ways, at least we are in the Career Tech Center, of seeing it, because we have to do this year a whole thing on to are we meeting the needs, are the programs for the Career Tech meeting the needs for the community? So we'll be doing that, and then part of that is also trying to see how we can figure out getting the data after the students.
Any other thoughts?
So is there a survey instrument that has been used in the past?
They have, they did the Endicott survey that they did for the NEASC accreditation process that is, it's about 200 pages long, and right. And then, but it's not specific to just Jackson and Bartlett. So they had, I want to say 850 responses, 600 from students, another 189 from community members, but it didn't disaggregate by Jackson and Bartlett. So they will be using that data along with other pieces for the strategic planning process and also to address Kennett High School specifically. But I think you're looking at a little bit more localized to Jackson and Bartlett. So one of the pieces we could try to do is do follow-up surveys of recent graduates. I think that would be valuable for everybody, but it might be a little bit easier to start with Jackson and Bartlett. But I can put that down.
So does that mean that we would be developing the instrument ourselves for the first time? This would be the
Yeah, I mean, they used to do, there are models out there for follow-up surveys. Just the mechanisms for getting that information back now is a lot different. There used to be postcards that you would get, and the kids would fill them out at graduation, and then they'd send out a letter and forms, and I think, you know, people are very much more connected through social media and whatnot, but that's out of my area of expertise. But we can work on that.
And so a survey monkey, I guess.
Yeah, Survey Monkey, but we can develop that, and like I said, there are different survey models out there. It used to be called Life Track, I believe, is what was used. But getting the information to the kids and getting the returns back, that was always the biggest thing. You might get 30%. I think you'd be
That's pretty good, 30%.
more successful
Right.
probably with the Jackson Bartlett folks, but I can put that down.
I mean, one of the things I would want to think about is how can we get information in a more real time so that, you know, you have and maybe once we get going, it would be every year we'd hear postgraduates doing their survey, but one of the things that concerns me is, you know, you get into high school and nothing's going to change in those 4 years generally because it takes so long to identify it and there are meetings and things like that. So for a kid that comes in freshman year, if we identify a problem, I mean, obviously there are certain problems we respond to right away, but they're not probably going to come to us through a survey anyway. But things that might be a trend that's happening, I think it's going to be difficult to change that if we're only doing it, I mean, depending on how long it takes us to do it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we lack, we're not as facile in some ways because of the bureaucracy. Jen?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I got a thought.
Oh, okay. Well, I know with Bartlett, with us, we follow the students as they're in through Kennett, and so report cards are being looked at, letters going out regarding the report cards and stuff through the principal and the family liaison person. So at least I feel confident that Bartlett knows how the students are doing through Kennett. It's more after when they get out of Kennett, are they prepared for whatever they decided to go to? Does that make sense?
So maybe on our end, it's a matter of us getting that information. I mean, not that we want individual information from students, but we have no idea how our kids are doing. Other than
I do get
honorable.
that.
Yeah.
I do get, it's great, it's, you know, it's basically.
Well, but, yeah, we know who's on the
grades
honor
and-
roll and whatnot, but do we know?
We get the absentee and discipline thing.
Yeah.
Well, you
But as
get-
far as guidance referrals, who's unhappy, how many have been, you know, bullying investigations, and I think that's some of the details you wanted to hear from kids, their social emotional adjustments. We don't get very much information on that. It's basically the data that's easy are the grades and the attendance and the behavior referrals because they're tracked already.
Right.
If I was understanding the conversations from before, it was more about perceptual data of how the kids were adjusting to this position.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were talking about in Bartlett and Jackson, did we get them ready enough for Canada? I thought that's what that.
Right, and I mean, you know, it's almost like what's the best thing and the worst thing about it each year, and is it something that we need to fix, or is it, you know, we might look at it and say, no, that's all those individual families, you know, or that's a problem that's nationwide. That's not, you know, there's nothing we can change about that, but right now there's nothing coming, you know, unless there's a big problem.
Yes, Scott.
I think Dr. Urban has a great point about the evaluation tool, and yeah, there's two pieces here: 7th and 8th grade, Bartlett Jackson, and then the high school grades. But I think if you take 7th and 8th grade, you could, for example, they do this Vicki Garland has this thing before something Bartlett goes to Kennett. She has a little meeting, wants to come and brings people from Kennett, speak with them personally, that this is what goes on in Kennett, this is what happens in Kennett, this is what they do at Kennett. And that's a wonderful thing, actually, my girls took part of that, which is
Right.
an outstanding part. So there's some kid-on-kid interaction there, but maybe that's a very good time for the 7th, 8th grade piece to say, hey, geez, you brought in Jackson kids, let's just fill out how your experience was in middle school before you go to graduation or a celebration ceremony or something, and get a little feedback there, but you have to have some type of parameter that you're looking for, and that's up to. But just a general feeling of children, I think you'd be able to just look at real quick, simple questions and say, hey, you know, they happy, sad, and different. But then the high school pieces, I think we kind of under control or as far as watching them.
Right now, I'm comfortable that between Joe and Vicki that we do for the high school piece that we're following the students between getting the absentees and the discipline report, but then getting, and if they haven't, correct me, Joe, if I'm wrong, but like if they're finding grade wise, then Joe sends a letter to the parents to say, okay, look at, you know, if there's anything you need. So I think, I mean, I don't know, Joe, you would know better.
Well, just listening to the conversation, I'm also wondering, it would be helpful to have clarification, Vicki and I, if we know what the indicators are that we're looking for, that would help us in just pursuing it. I would agree that grades may not be the most important thing to look at. I think, you know, whether they're engaged, whether they're satisfied with their education, whether they feel like they have some voice in their own education pathway, those are the things that I think are really important, but very hard to measure. So I'm happy to try to help gather information. But as much as the boards can clarify what that is, that helps us know what to look for and how to try to get it. I don't know if
I'm trying to figure out a way to.
I didn't really answer the question.
Compile some of our thoughts so we can pick out like the top cream of the crop that we're looking for. So I think we're all looking for a lot of information, but we're going in somewhat different directions. So I'm trying to figure out what are our commonalities, like you're saying here. Go ahead.
Kevin, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, might have been 3 now, but I think it was 2 years ago, at the cafeteria at the high school, we had a meeting of the whole SAU 9, I think SAU 13 was there as well. And when we spread out into groups, we were trying to define what student success was.
Yeah.
And we came up with a pretty good compilation of things that might be a good starting point for kind of what we're talking about here. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
If you have that.
That process will begin again. We actually have a meeting tomorrow, and we'll be looking for a couple representatives from SAU 9 different boards.
Yeah, no one has volunteered.
Get on board with that, but you're right, because that process, it's more global though. I think that you folks are more interested in, so when we do focus group conversations, it's not just Jackson, and it's not just Bartlett. So I think that piece, exactly, Jerry, it'll be portrait of a graduate. What would we like to see of our future graduates? And that answers those questions that I think you're all coming up to. Again, I think disaggregating out some of the information that might be more specific. The hard data that you could take a look at is, you're right, we had, you know, what's the attrition rate for Jackson students and even Bartlett, if you're interested, that enter 9th grade that don't complete 12th grade at Kent High School. And then you can start taking a look at, well, some kids went to private schools, some kids moved, some kids transferred, some kids went to homeschooling. And then you at least will have a snapshot of what is happening with all of our students. Because when they walk across the stage and they get their diploma, most of those kids had a very favorable experience in education. But are there populations that either we aren't hitting or not? And I'm not worried necessarily, personally, about the students who go to Eagle Academy or transition to graduate early in 11th grade or have the career option to start college early after graduating in December. It's those others who are a little bit more, let's find out where those folks are.
And part of it is I mean, it can be very comforting to look at honor roll or discipline issues, and you know that's a nice thing to latch onto. But to go back to what you were saying before, part of what I feel like we're missing, and I'm thinking about it as I have a child that's going into the high school, and what I wish I knew or could access, it does not relate to any specific kid, but what are some of the, we have a lot of students who, okay, take away the top and the bottom. We have a lot of students right in the middle who they're not complaining, their parents don't want to make an issue, but there are problems that are happening that we're not addressing because they're not complaining, because it's not a disciplinary issue. So, and to give you a specific example, we learned last year that a very small change that we can make at Bartlett would be to have Vicki Garland be a part of the transition team, or to give input in the surveys, right? So that, and because she knows a lot of our Bartlett students so well. And I don't think she was excluded on purpose, but we didn't figure that out until we had a problem. But we might have learned more if we did have a survey, as Scott said, you know, at the end of 8th grade, to say, you know, what was your rose and what was your thorn? You know, if you get 90% of students talking about one thorn, that could help us change things. That it might not be a catastrophic thing, but it really might affect their quality of life. And just to give one other small example, an issue that I, as a parent now, and a little bit as a school board member, you know, kids get into 7th and 8th grade, we have had such a big issue with our field hockey team, sending them to Kennett Middle School, and it's over now because there's only one more week of it. But that's something where I'm spending a lot of time trying to fix that on the side, but I think Mary has been, actually, I want to commend you guys because it's not our end that it's failing on, but that has been a really bad quality of life indicator for my family and for the other field hockey families. And it could be fixed by us requiring the middle school to call when there's a change, so that we're not driving an hour here or there, or we're putting a kid on a bus when the game has been canceled without her parent knowing about it, both of which have happened. So that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping to get at. I mean, I think we should look at the after post-graduation success and how are we doing. But that's part of what I'm wondering, because I want to know, is Kennett a good place to go? I mean, we can tout all the great achievements we have, and you know, I can look at the various police reports if I can access them, but I'm worried about that whole middle range where there are just things that make it difficult for that family to do what they're doing, you know, so.
At the high school level, the athletic teams still have emails, so every person gets email blast. The middle school should have email blasts, or Girl Church be doing email blasts for those two things, but sometimes they happen instantly.
Right.
That's sad because we only have kids from Bartlett field hockey, three kids. And again, the bus of the football kids and the go, we're all about that. We had, when this 6 years ago, we had a great debate about this concept 6 years ago. But it's the program still going, and at least they have the opportunity to do that, because there's no place in Bartlett for those kids to play football, field hockey. Thank God there's still soccer and probably basketball, but
baseball soon is probably going that way.
yeah, okay, well, so integrating with Conway is at least some place that have to go
right
to have that.
No, and to some degree it's a positive thing, but as far as the field hockey thing goes, I'm at the point now where I'm like, either we need to commit better and have the process better, or don't even offer it, because it's really been a very difficult challenge, and it's stupid little things that could easily be changed if we were communicating better and got the message from parents, you know, so. And maybe we can't get all of that information, but I think, I know schools are doing it. They're monitoring themselves, they're looking at themselves all the time. So if there's a way to at least get some of that back to us, I think it could help us.
I know they will be sending out a middle school survey to parents and all the kids on co-curricular.
So there you go, maybe that's one of the,
Early this
you know.
week, yeah.
So how often do they do that? Because that's the other thing.
At the end of every season.
Okay.
Do they read?
Do they?
Excuse me.
I never got it, so I'm going to send it to certain kids.
So it sounds like that issue might be solved, but we're still, I think as a group, a little disjointed per se as the goal of what we're looking for post-graduation, during school. I don't know if we should set up a subcommittee, or if we have a subcommittee that can handle bringing this together to come back to the board, say this is what we want to focus on, to ask, you know, Joe to do, and you know, Kevin to, you know, and Kevin to do at the high school, you know, to administer. So I don't think.
I feel pretty confident with Joe and I handling the transition
Okay.
from 6 and 7 to the middle school.
Oh, yeah.
The other high school piece, I think we could both use some little clarification. There's a lot you've talked about, and we obviously can't cover every single thing. So like I think you mentioned prioritizing the top 5 questions that you have or something that.
My personal opinion, having 3 now that have gone through this, is it's education-wise, they're ready. How we track that, I don't know. But I think the biggest piece I think we need to watch with our Bartlett Jackson kids is the social aspect. I think that's the hardest thing for them, rather than the academic side. I think they're, we've sheltered them a little bit over here, and they hit North Conway, and some of these people are seeing things that they've never seen before. And I think the social aspect is almost more important than the academics.
And I'm not 100% on board with that. I'm not worried about our academics.
Nancy was going to say something, sorry.
Well, no, I would just maybe suggest your board and our board, like in this December meetings, is come up with the top 5 things. Each of our boards, instead of doing a subcommittee, and then passing them on to Gail and Joe, and see exactly how they might coming up with how to do that. I'm pretty sure all of ours would be part of the same.
Similar, yeah.
Similar. I mean, I agree with you. It is, the education part of it, I think we have a handle on. And socially, it also, we all have to remember too that even the Conway students that have a transition that they used to not have when Kennett was middle school and high school. So they do go through a transition just as much as we do. Their parents are going through the transitions just as much as we are, with not knowing the teachers unless they have, compared to when it was all on one campus. And back then, I think there was a huge different transition. Bartlett and Jackson had a really bigger transition, but I think all of Kennett goes through it, including Madison and SEU 13. For it. So if there's some way that we can come up with prioritizing, I think would be the best thing, and then kind of move on from there.
It's a good idea. Jerry?
2 thoughts towards that, the social bit. The co-curricular activities, the more we integrate the Conway in that, and particularly outside of sports co-curricular activities, the better that's going to be for our Bartlett and Jackson kids. And there are opportunities for that, and maybe that's an area we can look at. Joe, I know you've been working on it for a long time with the sports issue, but maybe even outside of that, drama, music, arts, robotics, whatever the kids are doing, the more we can integrate them, the better that's going to help the social aspect of it. The other thing that we did in Jackson 2 years ago now is we had high school kids come in and talk to our 6th graders. And my son was in that class, and it really did a lot to help them understand what they were going to see, not only in middle school, but also in high school. And that's something I think that a mentor group of older students that can come in and talk to our grammar school kids when they're in 6th grade, or maybe our 7th and 8th graders when they're in Bartlett. It was a great activity, and maybe something to think about for the future.
Love doing.
Well, they should do it every year. I mean, we do that every year now, right, Gail?
That's awesome.
Jerry, was that 9th graders speaking to 6th graders?
It was actually, I think...
It was 7th and 8th graders speaking to 6th.
No, it was actually 10th and 11th graders speaking to 6th graders.
Okay, because we do some things with the 8th grade, but I don't think we have done anything with 6th. So that's an interesting idea.
Even
Jackson is doing some of that.
At the graduation, when you have the 2 students come down, I mean, that's a great thing. It really, it's the best part of graduation, I think, is to hear from those students.
Well, one of the other pieces that took place was the pavilion project that you folks had out here, and the CAD students and the building trades students coming in periodically as well. That'd be something to think about on both sides too. Just those, yeah.
Projects.
So I took a survey just today. It was an employee satisfaction that Maynard sent out just coincidentally, and I really liked it. It was very short. It was quantitative because it went from strongly disagree to strongly agree with gradations, and then it had a click box that you can write a note if you wanted to. So the ideally, I would love to see something that was no longer than 5 minutes, that could be delivered the same questionnaire through the years, that you can see trends up and down, but there's always a chance to write in something that has struck the student or the parent. So if some of you just take a crack at this thing, and we could just all chime in. You want me to do it?
No. Well, so I just printed out today for the strategic planning process, and maybe I'll just share it with you first, but we used 3 different ones, right? It was to the students, and it went down as far as 5th and 6th grade, all the way up through 12th grade, to the parents. And there were 11 questions long, open-ended response. And that data was spot on. And it was followed up with focus group conversations with all different groups of students. The AP students, to Eagle Academy students, to middle school students, and the data is there. It's just not specific to, but you could probably, because they did have to identify which district they were from, so you could pull it out. The problem is that the sample size is so small that you could follow it, but we can take a look at what was given 5 years ago, and then I'm sure it'll come up again. But they were all validated questions, research-based.
So I think we read those together this summer.
We did.
Those, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that is exactly the kind of stuff that
Yeah.
I'm thinking about. And of course, when you get the responses, you can weed out the ones that are not real responses. But they showed real issues that people were having.
Yeah.
And, we were able to respond to that. You know what I mean? And I know one of the concerns I have is that was 5 years ago.
Right.
So what are we doing for a kid who comes in
Yeah.
freshman year and that issue is still going on 3 years later? Can we be more dynamic? Can we get more real-time information? I don't know, maybe we can't, but.
So it sounds like, I like Nancy's suggestion that we come up with the top 5 questions possibly at our board meeting, start talking about it, and then get back to the December meeting for both of us. Turn in questions, and then we'll let Joe and Kevin, high school, they fight it out. Yeah.
And I would say Power School really seems to be working pretty well so far this year for my new 9th grader. It's helpful and it works.
For you knowing what's happening.
In his classes, yeah.
And for them to know what's happening.
To meet feedback, and
Yeah.
it's working really well.
The kids use it all
That
the
is good to
time.
hear.
right?
No thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Curious in the company.
They give us a few years
Yeah.
and they
It's-
did
it's-
the,
And I know I don't think it's worked this well, this much. Like, it's been a long process getting it going.
My opinion from my 5 or 6 years of high school now is that this year has been way better with real-time data entry from teachers. Like I've had, in the past, I've had students, one of my kids say, we got like so much stuff they haven't even put in here yet, and things like that. So you can
Who's
show
lying
them.
to us?
Yeah. And I found out over the years that there was some truth to that. Some teachers weren't as good as others. They had a certain amount of time, and some would wait for the last minute. And maybe that time frame has changed over the last few years. I don't know, but I definitely have noticed it's way more accurate real time now.
So just one last follow-up. One
Yeah.
of the other surveys we're looking at is what's called the Hope Survey. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but you can take a look at that, and we'll be looking at it. I think you have to purchase it, but that's going to be my push too. It's a decent survey.
Did you say hope?
HOPE, yeah, and that gets at a lot more of the social emotional readiness part of tackling life in general. So
I have one more to add on that before Ken makes us move on to the next thing. Here in Jackson, I know you guys in Bartlett do a similar thing. We have step-up day. And then same thing with our 6th graders or whatever head over to Bartlett for a day before the year. Can we do that with the 8th graders into 9th grade? Maybe with Key Club people, maybe in March or April.
they don't have it,
They do have.
Maybe they
those.
just pick a day where they are assigned someone from the Key Club, and they just go for a few classes, and they sit through the classes, they walk the hallways, in between classes, they eat lunch, they go spend a few hours. and-
don't they have it, they have something in August, don't
They
they?
have
Or did they
a
never-
freshman day.
Nobody
that-
else is
Well,
there.
throw them right into a real day.
But
Throw them
they're-
right into a real day. Have them
They're
have
not
a
there with
partner
all
for
of
the
the
day, whether that's a
students
Key
in
Club
May or
person.
June, I don't think.
And not for a whole day, go send them for a few hours, they can see what it's like.
I mean, it's awkward. High school is just,
Yeah, so
how
throw
much
them in the
can
wolves
you-
right away.
right, I mean, we do a lot to get our kids ready for high school, and all the kids that are going, as Nancy stated now, even the ones that are going to Kennett Middle School, are all being thrown in. We want to I think we're doing a lot for our kids to
Yeah.
get them ready. I mean,
But
And I
then
think,
what you might
yeah.
get out of that is you might get, some kid that comes home crying to his mother saying, oh my God, there's no way I can do, you should have said, I saw people kissing in the hallway, I saw a fight, I saw this and that. Okay, now, we've got 5 months before we've got to start high school. Let's talk about this,
I would be surprised.
Yeah. The only thing I would be worried about is when you're looking at all the 8th graders coming, and I know, like you're saying, we're looking at Bartlett and Jackson, but May and June at the high school, there is so much going on in their classrooms when it comes to the AP testing and everything that they're trying to get ready.
Well, maybe we don't have to hit them all at once. Maybe there's over a course of 6 or 8 weeks, we send, we pick a day a week where you send, how many 8th graders out there? 35, 40?
Right, but I'm just saying, if Bartlett and Jackson, if Ken is saying yes to Bartlett and Jackson, then you're going to be saying yes to the Ken Middle School also.
Well, they already are a little bit familiar, when they ride the bus with the kids, they have a little bit more familiarity with the social aspect than they do.
Yeah, the bus,
They're
you're
just
about
as
that.
afraid,
But
too.
they're just as afraid, and the parents are just as struggling as any of us as parents, completely, if you talk to any of the parents, except that sports-wise is a little bit different because you have some more of the club sports, but our kids that do the sports in Jackson and Bartlett, our club sports are doing that 7th and 8th grade. They're the same transition as those kids. But you're right about the bus, but I'm just saying that when it comes to walking down the hallways with those seniors and all of that stuff. I mean, they're trying to do the camps, career tech camps. I would rather see, I know what you're saying about like a day in the life, but it's also getting our 8th graders familiar with middle school 8th graders so that they're going in together.
That's more what I would do.
I think that would be my.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I like it. I think logistically it would be a nightmare, and it would be really hard to execute.
Yeah.
But what I think is really good, I mean, they have the dance in April, where they try to get all of the 8th graders together. I think that's the kind of thing that really has just as much of an effect. Let them get, like as Nancy just said, let them get to know the other 8th graders from Tamworth, from Conway. And that's going to be far more effective in how they enter high school. High school, you look at these kids and the dynamics of the different classes alone, it's just hard to integrate them into a day. You throw them in with the freshmen, they already feel so awkward.
You have to think about how you did it.
But unless we did something even with the career tech during the school sense, like with the robotics team, is there a way that like the 7th or the 8th grade robotics, whoever's interested in Bartlett and is interested in Kennett Middle School, is there something they can do with the robotics team at the high school? You know what I mean? So that they would see that stuff, maybe something where it's not overwhelming or like Key Club. We have K Kids, maybe can do something with the Key Club kids at the high school and trying to do something like that.
I mean, I think we should, just to kind of move it along a little bit, but also I think these are kind of the questions that we may want to put into the survey.
Yep.
And some of it, I think, is the parents, because I'm there too, the parents have these feelings of the kids, they're only hearing the negative stuff on the ride home from the school or at the dinner table for the most part, and then a few months later it all changes, or the next year it changes. So some of it is the parents and maybe having more parent meetings to say this is what your kid's going to expect in high school, this is what you should expect in high school, and this is where the kid's brain is in high school and what to look for. I think those things are also helpful as well. So there's a lot to think about, but I think getting those questions together, what are we really looking for, what are we looking at, and just trying to get moving on. So thank you. All right. So the SAU9 study committee?
Yeah, so hopefully everybody did take a look at the website, but we're getting to a point where we've gone through, and it appears, and I'll just throw this out there, that governance is a huge part moving forward. And by governance, talking about right now, Conway ultimately makes all the decisions for the high school, which is what you're talking about right now. So at the next SAU9 meeting, the question will be, are people interested, both in SAU9 and 13, in looking at forming a cooperative study group? And I guess this is just either questions or comments specifically about the financial end of things or anything else related to that study committee. And then the conversation about, is there interest in there with either Jackson, Bartlett, toward looking at high school cooperative agreement?
Yeah, I would say that probably is interest in looking at it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think it can only be responsible of every board to look into it and vet it out. I mean,
Yeah, that's
our personal opinions about a cooperative side, unless we know exactly what the details are, then we won't know how to, in an educated way, make recommendations and advocate for something.
Well, yesterday I was there, Rob was there, I thought it was a fascinating process, and it comes down to this numerous ways you could do this. But ultimately, at some point, Congress has to make a decision, would they allow for, this, talking high school only here, would they allow for a cooperative with us to the high school? And that's probably the first step way down the road we have to take, because if they said yes to that, then some towns can say, okay, I want that, or you can still have a tuition agreement. You can still have a tuition agreement and have a cooperative. So that means you got a cooperative, you have a whole other board eventually that would dictate, can't you have the Conway School Board, have SU9 School Board, you can have a cooperative school board. So that's, I mean, we got some time to do this, but I think Kevin was, and the staff at SU9 was very proactive in getting us forward to give us a year or two to think about this before it all hits the fan. I thought it was a very educational experience for everyone involved, and we disseminate that material to our board levels and have the conversation. I mean, I think governance was the biggest piece. It wasn't so much about, quote, money.
Right.
Until the money changes.
Until the money changes. then that's going to be big. That's right.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things we ended up, one of the conclusions was that Conway's going to have a lot of control over what happens. So I think part of the committee discussion was, well, is there a timeline for this? That maybe Conway needs to start that. I mean, not that we're not looking at it, because I'll say on our end, of course, I mean, I think of course we want to look at this, but I think we should look at all of our options, you know. So I don't know, it's not like they have to lead everything, but if they're not interested, then they're not interested.
I agree.
Yeah.
But one thing that might force them to be interested is how would if Bartlett and Jackson didn't have a high school, how would the state pick the rate?
To
The
go
state
where?
would tell Conway that they have to take us, and they would pick the rate, tuition rate, correct?
Well, there are a lot of different pieces right now in the tuition agreement currently. The highest paying district for the high school, they vary. They vary from about $18,000 a year to the high, and it fluctuates to about $40,000.
So is that what the state would look at when they were determining the rates?
So they won't break the tuition contract. So if Jackson and Bartlett, let's say
No, I'm saying, let's say that it's expired.
yeah, right. But there's a new agreement in place.
No agreement.
Oh, if
We're at a
yeah.
stalemate. We
If
can't
all
agree.
other
We have-
7 towns around,
Yeah.
they would, I don't know what the rate would be.
I mean, that might be something interesting, because that might persuade Conway to discuss with us that you might be better off.
Well, I think there's a lot of motivation on behalf of Conway to work with these folks. I
Yeah,
mean,
I just mean when we get to the 11th hour, we talked about it's real, ultimately up to them about the co-op. They could say no, and the 7 towns could say yes, and there's no co-op.
right.
But and the thing is, that's what we're doing this early, because if they all of a sudden realize they don't own everything with no income, it's a $34 million budget, and we, not
Yeah.
we, but we 17 million
16,
smart people.
17 million.
It's almost half and half.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're losing half. What the hell are they going to do with this? What
right.
can
I
they do
mean,
with
but
this?
and that was the one more piece of the puzzle, is what I'm saying. Right now, we're paying whatever it is, let's say $25,000 a year. If all of a sudden there was a stalemate and there was nothing, and the state said to Conway, you gotta take these kids, is that rate gonna go up, down, the same?
I think it's important that all of us start these committees and looking at it, because we all realize we have agreements to 2000, I think it's 24 that we have to decide. In 2024, we could have a whole new board except for 1 or 2 people, and that's the same with Conway. So what Conway's feelings are right now, we can't judge, okay, in 2024, that's going to be the same feeling, because we don't know who's going to be on that board. So I think it's important for our boards to do all the research and know the information, because at least one or two of us are gonna still be on the board at that time, and then we can educate the rest of the board, instead of having it that, well, wait for Conway, and then all of a sudden it's 2024, we have like 4 new members on our board, and they don't have an idea, and now we're starting this process where we get really behind.
I just want to clarify, I would never wait for Conway for us to do our research and decide what we thought was best for our students.
Okay.
I would never do that. I would never advocate that.
Right, I mean, it's, what Nancy said is absolutely right about that, but I think we need to go a little bit beyond that, from educating ourselves as to what leverage is. And what leverage does Jackson have? What leverage does all the seven towns have? And what's real leverage? What's perceived leverage?
Yeah.
And I think the elephant in the room at the end of the day is Conway's not likely to ever go for a co-op because of the dollars that they lose. And we have to kind of educate ourselves into what that means, so that we.
That's so true.
I don't know that, I'll be honest.
Well, those aren't things that are hard to figure out, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
We can educate ourselves as to what the dollars actually are. What does a co-op dollar look like? What does it do to the tax rate in Conway? What does it do to Jackson's tax rate? What does it do to Bartlett's? We can estimate those to the point where they're fairly accurate. And we'll see what happens. And like Jess said, we can't wait for Conway to make a decision on what we do. There's no reason for us not to know exactly what they are. And then not only go beyond the board with what leverage is, but we have to educate the public to what that is. Because what it all boils down to, what I would hate to see is the animosities that kind of generated last time we tried to form a co-op. Because all of us, I mean, the different towns kind of thought that we knew things that we didn't know. And the public at large didn't understand the issue. So what I think we need to do as boards is that we understand it's not just the boards. We need to, as boards, we're responsible for educating the public what the decision should be and what the recommendations should be. And that's why the earlier we jump on these things to learn, the better job we can do conveying out to the public what we're going to do. And I mean, I think that each town should do its own committee, subcommittee as to what not only the contract should or shouldn't be, but also what their options are. You know, Jackson does have the luxury of exploring other options. We'll probably do what we did last time, which is try to go for Kennett. But we did look at Gorham, we did look at Freiburg. Bartlett might have those options, might not. Other towns might have other options that they want to look at. But we need as boards to get the public on board with what our recommendations and decisions are going to be. And the sooner we educate ourselves with what those options are, the better off we're going to be. So we need to fully understand what a co-op does to our budgets, to Conway's budget. So if it comes down to it, like Jackson gets angry because Conway doesn't look like they're going to go for the co-op, we have to know why Conway isn't going to go for the co-op. Or let's say maybe Conway is going to go for the co-op. And we need to understand what those things are so that when we go into these negotiations, if you will, we'll know what we're talking about.
Just a little piece of history. Last time we voted on this stuff, Conway actually voted before Jackson. Bartlett Conway did vote for the co-op. And that fellow was like, oh my gosh, so they did vote for the co-op before. Because they were building a new building, and they want everyone to have the best interest. Now they own the building, so we want to become part of the co-op. Obviously, be some type of buy-in for the facility that they own, because Conway owns that facility, we don't, which is leverage, in my opinion, because it's going to need repairs in the future.
But any agreement's going to have capital improvements.
But they did vote for co-op before when they had the high school.
Right, which was a moot point because Jackson turned it down.
Jackson turned it down, right.
But I think you're right with education.
To that end of educating both the public as well as the boards, one of the things that's on our radar from last month is the idea that Kevin might come and do an informational meeting. And I think I'm in the same boat as you, Scott, I thought what we went through was fabulous and really, I really learned a lot. And I don't think, as much as I would like to, I don't know if we can recreate that for everyone, but I am wondering, would you all want to do a joint session so he doesn't have to do it in every town, where I think I was at least, and I think the board was going this way of starting the ball rolling, just to even get definitions out to people. Like, what are we looking at? Just start to get people used to it, because I think that is part of it. People don't really pay a ton of attention, and then all of a sudden, they don't have all the information, or they're reading it the night of the vote.
Even just getting the dates out, because even at the joint board meeting, we had some that were like, oh, wait, we had to 2023. I didn't even realize that. We thought we had to 2020, you know? So just to get it, if board members are confused, I think it's educating, like you said, the board members that weren't part of it, and then going with the public and trying to get the public too.
But I mean, I think that honestly, what's the best thing for our student piece is pretty simple. And as individual boards to figure that kind of thing out, we don't really need to work with Bartlett on what what's the best interest of our students. What we do need to do, though, I think, together, all the towns, is we should lay it out there, because it does come down to dollars and cents, and that's ultimately what's going to happen. I think we should start figuring out what is the tax rate going to do to all of the towns involved under different scenarios. You know, what's an area agreement that doesn't have average daily attendance, but is just basically on the kids you send, versus one that has an area agreement where it's, well, however many kids are in your town is how many you're paying for. Like the agreement that we have between each other, it's, you know, it's like our Jackson people kind of complain that, hey, it's not really fair to Jackson, you're paying so much per student. It's like, but what's fair for Jackson is the fact that you don't require us for the number of students we have, it's the number of students we actually send. That's a big bonus for Jackson. So those are different kinds of area agreements we can look at, and we can know this is what Conway's tax rate is going to be, this is what Jackson's tax rate is going to be. Under a few different kinds of co-ops, we can look at what are our tax rates going to be and start sharing that information, because that's what it's going to come down to. So that's the kind of work I think that we should really start trying to plug away at. And that's really what will teach us what is a co-op. And then the other thing with the co-op is we should understand what are our voting powers actually going to be. Because in any co-op, Conway's still going to have the voting leverage. They're just going to by the numbers of people that they have. It's just, that's the way it's going to work out. So we're really gaining anything from that degree. And I think my point of all of this is that, I mean, I've seen an SAU 9 board that's matured very well over the years. And I'd hate to see us not understanding that that's where we have the leverage. That's where we have the ability to really have our voices heard, because Conway does listen and they do share. So I mean, I think the more productive we are in that regard, the better off we're all going to be in the long run.
And that's why we tried to do more education for the boards, and that's why it's really important for all board members to try to make the SAU meetings, because that's where the communication between all the different towns, and also Kevin can sit down and go through stuff with the high school. We're asking, you know, what do the board members want to see? And we have 20 minutes of our meetings every other month that Kevin and Katie, or, you know, we're going to be having Kevin Carpenter come, because it's easier to have him come to the SAU meeting with 27 members can be right there, than Kevin go to 7 different board meetings saying the exact same thing. So it is an important meeting, and important too. So that's my plug. That's my plug on the SAU side.
So would you all be interested in sharing informational sessions with us? Or do you want to just do, like, if he were to come and talk about, hey, this is what this committee did, just for board members as well as the public to come out and say.
How about in the May meeting when we have a joint meeting?
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up.
I think we already discussed that, didn't we?
No, I don't.
Also to share.
I think we did.
Yeah, and then share
You mentioned about
the
that.
invites, yeah, and just see what works best, because we just want to be careful. We'd love to, but we want to make sure that it works for all, like the communities.
Sure.
As the timing and stuff, so, yeah. Thank you.
I could do I'll commit to a morning and an afternoon. That's it.
Okay,
Give you 2 dates.
all right. Jackson 7th grade transition?
I think that this
We're
year.
good?
Yeah.
Talked about that, we're good?
I think we were more how's it going this year. That's why that's on there.
I think it's good. How's it going?
I was going to mention a couple things. We have done a few things already. I mean, we always have the dances and the sporting events, but I think where the real important transition connections happen is where students are working together, kind of going to what Gary was saying earlier about how the high school kids getting ready to go to high school, they go to the dance. I think we can improve that. You know, one of the things we are doing now that we weren't doing is the C-Perch 6th grade program, and I think that's a chance where all 6th grade kids from the Valley get to know each other. They're working together in small teams. And I think if we can do more of that working together, that's how they really get to know each other. When we used to do the baseball round robin for students getting ready to go to high school, the Bartlett boys would hang out here with their team, and the Kennett boys would hang out with their team, and there just wasn't the mixing that we wanted to see. So I think we have to really intentionally mix them.
We have the track meet in the spring. We held in September STEM Fest, where all the 6th graders go to the Kennett Middle School with all of the other SAU 9 students.
We had the ecology school overnight trip. That was a 3-day.
That's just with Bartlett. But the STEM Fest and C-Perch we do in all the schools. We don't bring all the kids together, though. We just do it.
Just Bartlett Jackson are combined here.
But we could explore that.
So I do think always room for improvement.
And of course,
I
Louis
just think
Fuchs for the
having
music
kids work-
kiddos.
What's that?
Louis Fuchs for
Oh,
the
yeah.
music.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to point out that got missed earlier, Kennett High School did a really cool event last 2 Friday nights ago, I think it was, where they invite band and chorus and dance kids to go and meet up with the high school kids. And they spend the afternoon getting to know each other and getting kind of coached by those older students, and then they perform with them that night at the football game. And
Which was awesome.
That's the type of thing
Yeah.
where they're building connections by doing something together instead of just being in the same place, I think is important.
Homework readiness for high school?
I think that was on the, Jerry had questioned last year, the reduction in homework from previous years.
No, that wasn't me, that was Jen. I'd like, the less homework, the better in my book.
I think, I don't know if it was homework readiness or
Lack of it?
Because we're reducing it, now all of a sudden
Scheduling.
they're gonna start having more again. I think that's
And,
right, that's me with all of it.
that, and also like the scheduling part of it. They used to give out like schedule, like help kids like organize their schedules, like on where their homework was and what all that stuff was, so that they would be ready for high school with knowing how to use like some tool to schedule. And then 7th and 8th grade over the last few years have gone, teachers they've kind of gone rogue. Teacher can put it on the board, they can put it on the phone, they can put it wherever, so there wasn't one particular tool. Where I remember each kid in like 6th grade got a schedule, like a paper or book, and everybody was writing the same things down, so that was all over the map. So I noticed that some of the 9th graders now are all over the map, so, and they're missing stuff, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we've gone through a couple different attempts at organization systems for middle school students. The current version is a Google Calendar that all the teachers now can load the information to the students' Google Calendar, so that at the beginning of the year they
So
set that
all
up.
the teachers are now doing the same, which was great, because we went through this phase where they were not. Everybody was doing
Yeah,
what
and
they wanted.
there's still challenges with that system. It doesn't work great for every student or every family, but I think at least we're more consistent now than we were, and there's one tool that we're teaching all students, here's a system to use, but always with the caveat that if this doesn't work for you, let's come up with a system that does work for you.
Right.
And I can pass that on to the middle school team again. Let's make sure that
I mean, it's just
that
one
skill of
aspect of,
organization
right, it's a
is great.
skill that we're teaching our kids, how to be organized and to know things, whatever that is, but at least if the teachers could all be on the same page, which it seems
That
like
could be
they
a
are.
survey question. How well did we prepare you for organization?
Right. Sharing services.
Is there any thought about Power School and middle school, like similar to the high school kids?
It is.
We use PowerPoint.
Yeah,
So they can log in the same way the high school kids can and see what their assignments are?
Yeah,
It was 2 years ago.
yeah.
Something like that. We went from what was it called, the Power School 2 years ago?
MMS.
Oh, yeah, the MMS.
Yeah,
So
we
now
use
it's the
that.
same exact program as the high school level?
So the data goes and you have to retype
And
the
they
data
keep,
next.
you keep the same login as you move up.
Yeah,
I haven't filled out
into
paperwork
high
in
school,
2
it's
years.
the same.
Girls, yeah,
Same
there it
email?
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right there.
Awesome. Sharing services?
That was one that I had wanted to throw on there, really more from the standpoint of just saying I know that Gail, Joe, and the SAU will continue to work behind the scenes on facilitating what's best for Jackson, but it's just express our gratitude for the fact that Bartlett's willing to share your services on some of the levels it has, because it's gotten us out of a jam. But I'd like to see us continue to work that where it makes sense for both schools to share services, that we continue to do that.
No, I agree. I think it's a good thing.
Hopefully it leverages us to be able to hire better qualified candidates that have more job, say. All right, board member issues? Anything? Jerry?
Something Nancy said before about the SAU 9 meeting. It's something I think that Conway does that really, I think, shows a lot of trust at the SAU 9 board. And Jane Gray facilitated it before, but Nancy's been doing it. It's your 3rd year now or 4th year? 5 years?
I don't know.
Too long.
I don't know.
But to any extent
I
that
think there's, I
to
don't know.
any degree that we take it for granted, you really do deserve our gratitude and thanks. I mean, it's really important for both Bartlett and Jackson, we kind of ride your coattails in that regard, but I know there's a lot of work in that position, and we do really appreciate it, so thank you.
Full-time job.
I will echo, you know, just to piggyback, because I see she does yeoman's work. She's either on the phone, stopping by, a lot of work, so echo.
Thank you. It's a really good staff to work with, so it's very easy. So,
It should be a second position, I think.
don't worry.
Through the
about it.
SAU9.
My husband's gonna be like, yeah.
Through the SAU9.
Yeah.
You're paying it anyway.
One way or another.
Well, you pay a little bit.
All right, any other business?
The only thing is I did want, and I know you'll be bringing it up, is that the personnel committees for Bartlett and Jackson have met, and we started going over the family liaisons job description, and we did it bullet point and had Vicki go over it, and you know, you sit there kind of going, wow, I don't know how we're going to hire someone else coming in, but our personnel, we gave Jen and Jess a draft of it, and then Joe's still fine tuning it, and then we'll get that to you, hopefully in like December, as to what we're looking at for a job description of when and if we need to have another family liaison person.
All right, thank you. That's a lot of work, just trying to figure out how to replace her,
Yeah.
let alone actually.
Yeah, very much so, that was it.
When is her last? Is it this coming June, right?
No,
Well, there's nothing official
we haven't
yet.
gotten any retirement.
That's my expectation.
Yeah, no. So we're just doing that, but we as Bartlett personnel are looking at all job descriptions throughout the school, because some of the job descriptions, you know, they were typed on a typewriter. And it's, so you have Mrs. Emery's that is really teaching typing. So we're in the process, we just started with our 2 salary non-contract, which was the family liaison, and then we're going to the tech, Mrs. Emery, and then we're going to be working from there to get it, because jobs have evolved, with the way education has evolved. So we're trying to work on that. So it just happened that it was the family liaison. It's not because anyone's leaving, because we don't know anything.
All right. So we'll get just to recap, so we have the follow-up, we'll get our top 5 priority questions for the survey back to you guys, so that we can, by December.
Yeah,
so
we'll do this
December.
December.
Yep. And then we'll figure that out, so that would be nice. And then our next meeting is May 5th, 2020. And if we do have any other meetings about a co-op or how we're going to transition or any information, we'll certainly extend the invitation to your community.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to be starting to discuss it. We haven't really gone fully with our board on discussing about our next steps. So we'll keep you guys informed too. And that's the same with the personnel, if you guys have any questions or anything too.
Great, all right.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Wait, what?
Make a motion to adjourn.
You're quick, Scott.
All right. You got 2 minutes.
We only have 2 minutes for our next meeting. That's it.